Welcome to the Experimentation Edge, where product managers, data scientists, and engineers talk about how they make smarter decisions. I'm Ashley Stirrup, the Chief Marketing Officer for GrowthBook, and in each episode, I'll sit down with an executive to unpack how they use experimentation and A/B testing to make better decisions. This show is sponsored by GrowthBook, the open source experimentation platform leader. Now let's jump in and get started with our next guest. Welcome, Vinoj, to the show. Vinoj Kumar is the Vice President of Engineering at Upwork, the world's leading marketplace, where he leads engineering, building the platforms that connect tens of millions of businesses and freelancers globally. Thanks for joining us today, Vinoj. We're excited to explore your approach to testing and product experimentation at Upwork.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. As Ashley mentioned, I'm Vinoj Kumar and I lead engineering at Upwork. And before we get started, and I thought what might be fun for your listeners is my world actually sits at the intersection of infrastructure and product. That doesn't get talked about much. I work on AI pipelines, for example, backend systems, developer experience. And by the way, my measure of success is always in product terms. Did search get faster? Did marketplace trust hold up? Did engineers ship better features because platform underneath them improved, so on and so forth. So experimentation at my layer looks a bit different. The feedback loops are longer, and the blast radius when something goes wrong is much, much wider. I just wanted to put that out.
That's really great context. And if you're doing all that work around AI, I'm sure your world is changing all the time.
Indeed.
So how do you decide what to test and what not to test?
It's a great question because honestly, the idea that everything must be tested equally is a trap that kills most engineering folks, right? The way I look at it, it's not a yes or no question. It's a sliding scale. I always use one simple rule, blast radius times reversibility. If we are touching something with a massive blast radius, like the core search algorithm or the billing pipeline, it's hard to undo, right? We test it relentlessly. Shadow traffic, slow canaries, the works, you know. But on the flip side, if it's an internal tool affecting a small team, we can roll it back in 2 minutes. Hey, to be honest, heavy testing is just a tax on our momentum. For those, my philosophy is ship it fast, watch the monitors, and fix it forward.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And have there been any tests where you've had, a surprising result that caused you to kind of think differently about, your approach to experimentation?
You mean to say what good looks like, or where are you thinking with things in terms of what's good, or are you referring in a different sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I would imagine in your line of business, there's kind of two levels to it. One is it faster? Is it, more accurate or something like that, better search? But then I would imagine there's also is it improving the customer experience? And like that can be much harder to predict.
Yeah. So that's a great question. Actually, I think about this in two levels because I have two customer sets, like I described, right? First, a lot of my customers at Upwork are internal engineering teams. I hear the developers building the marketplace features, for example. For them, good means low friction, faster builds, reliable deploys, clear documentation, and when something breaks at 2 a.m., quick recovery, right? I measure that through deploy frequency or mean time to recovery and developer satisfaction surveys and so on and so forth. On the other hand, my second customer set is indirect, but arguably more important, the freelancers and clients on the platform. They never see my infrastructure, but they feel it, right? For them, good means the platform is fast, reliable, and the AI-powered features such as search, matching, recommendations, they all deliver results instantly, and also they're good, right? For example, a freelancer should be able to find the right job in minutes, not hours. A client should get quality proposals quickly. So basically, the infrastructure exists to make the invisible seamless. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah. And if you zoom out a little bit and think about all of Upwork, I would imagine that, all the different teams each have their own different view on experimentation. Is that true? Do you see different
Yeah,
approaches across the company?
yeah. It's funny that you asked that because one of the biggest lessons I've learned in that is when you look at experimentation and you look at low quality and high quality, that high quality doesn't always, high activity doesn't mean high quality. Right? In fact, it can be the exact opposite. A lot of times, for example, a low quality experience disguises itself as high engagement. For example, if a user is frantically clicking, right, refreshing or changing their search terms 5 times, they aren't highly engaged. They're actually a little confused and they're kind of stuck in retry form. To find true high quality experience, I always look at success ratio. For example, if you're looking for something, how many successful outcomes did we get versus total interactions? To me, that's one good metric. At the end of the day, we want users to find what they need with fewer clicks, not more. So efficiency is the real marker for quality in that sense, if what you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a great example from Microsoft where they had a bug in their relevance engine for Bing. And so it led to poor organic search results. And it meant the ads looked so much more relevant than the results. And so the ads started skyrocketing. They were getting a lot more revenue. But obviously that was, a terrible outcome for their customers and not a good long-term one. And so making sure you're tracking the right things is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm nodding as you speak.
So, how do you distinguish between a low quality and high quality user experience? Like you mentioned one good example there, which is just tracking kind of completion rates. Are there other metrics that you use to figure out if your customers are having good experiences?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I have a great example for that. For example, a very interesting example, so to speak. We built an internal tool called Talk to Data. Basically, it's a natural language chatbot hooked up to our data lake, like Looker. So anyone in the company, be it marketing or product, could just ask questions in plain English without needing to know SQL.
Hmm.
When it came to measuring engagement, it was tricky. At first glance, you might think, hey, let's just count how many questions people are asking, right? Every day. That's raw data. But here's the catch. If a product manager asks the bot the same question 5 different ways, right? Because the bot is giving bad answers, your dashboard shows high engagement. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have a frustrated product manager trying to get answers.
Right.
That's a retry straw, not really success.
Yes.
We had to so what we did was we had to look at it completely differently with different set of metrics to measure true engagement. First, we looked at explicit feedback. Hey, we track thumbs up and thumbs down ratio on the generated answers to gauge immediate quality. Okay, that's a signal. That's too bad. But we quickly realized we needed to look deeper at the friction of that interaction. So we also started tracking what we call turns to success. In other words, for example, with natural language tools, if a user asks the question and then has to correct 3 or 4 different 5 times saying things like, no, that's, I meant Q3. No, exclude international. No, that's not what I meant. That's high friction, right?
Yes.
So even if they eventually gives a thumbs up, it's very painful. So we wanted to optimize for that 0 shot or 1 shot success, meaning they got exactly what they needed on the first or second try.
Yes.
And ultimately for this, the real proof of engagement wasn't really in chatbot's dashboard. So we looked, or, just plain thumbs up. So what we did was we looked at the data team's JIRA backlog. When we saw the usage of talk to data going up and the number of ad hoc basic data tickets, right, for example, submitted to our analysts drop by 20%, that's when we knew the engagement was real, right? So at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you want the ticket to the data scientist going down.
Yeah. I think that's such a great example because, I think all the AI chatbots are another example of where you have a hard time with that. If people are asking multiple questions, is that really a good or a bad thing? And so we have a couple of the largest AI chatbot companies as customers at GrowthBook, and what they're looking is daily average usage metrics. What you've got is even better than that because you can see basically further down the supply chain and see that, oh, they've stopped asking questions over here because they're getting their questions answered here. And I think that's like one of the key challenges for a lot of product teams today is how do you build your product so that you get more visibility into the user experience so you can actually see if they had that positive outcome or not.
Right. And sometimes it's not easy to measure too, because you look at different signals. Sometimes you might have to combine them to actually get to the right signal to measure, what's good quality metric you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of leads into the what new or unusual metric have you used to kind of analyze new features?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good segue. Actually, I actually love talking about this one. For example, what I find in my line of work is that the standard metrics are creating a massive silos across the teams right now. I'll give you some examples, right? Your finance yelling about cloud costs. Engineering always obsesses about latency. and the data science folks only caring about, like, for example, model accuracy. And if you're only optimizing for one, you're actually ruining the other two, right? It's always like almost like a triangle, like the triangle, right? It comes at a cost, it's the other one. So we are actually, so in one of the experiments that we're doing here, we're actually tracking a composite metric. Let me call it cost per quality inference. I'll tell you what that is, right? Or CPQI. We are literally stitching together real-time cloud billing data, for example, performance telemetry, and data science quality scores into a unified dashboard. So the idea being, for the idea being that it forces some alignment across all these departments. It's like game changing. In other words, for example, with this dashboard, if an engineer is making the system lightning fast, but it's tripling our AWS bill and degrading the AI accuracy, the CPI score is going to tank immediately, right? It's a composite score. So the idea is to keep the composite score high and strike the balance between, quality, cost in these trade-offs that we have to make. And actually, it's becoming our ultimate source of truth in how we balance our infrastructure investments, because fast is not always good. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can just imagine there's a whole host of kind of cultural things that need to go along with that, like breaking down silos in terms of how people work together to get to these shared outcomes. Is that true?
That's absolutely true, right? Because, for example, if you don't have this composite quality, then you have the silos you're optimizing for one, like I said before, and then you actually one has an effect on the other. You can build something that's super fast and super good, but if your bill is super high, then your cost per product feature is going to be super high, and it may not be very profitable, right? You have to strike that right balance. So in that sense, you have to find some sort of composite metrics to measure and move along.
Yeah. And in your role, are you supporting data scientists across the company?
Data engineering, there is different data science groups where I do have data engineering team that actually supports the data analytics folks. You can call it data science to some degree.
Yeah. And so I would imagine the kind of the consumer and the, what do you call them? The consultants or contractors, the people
Yeah,
fulfilling the work?
freelancers.
The freelancers, yes. I would imagine that those populations, you're doing a lot of data science analytics to understand the users and how they're engaging with your platform and where the opportunities are to kind of improve things. And so I would imagine that's very different than the kind of work you're doing on the infrastructure side to, optimize that. Like you're looking at different metrics again and optimizing for different things versus the people focused on the UI and the end user experience in that regard.
Yeah, so there are several metrics on the end user experience. For example, even if you look at end user freelancers or client, what are some of the metrics that make sense? Hey, like I said, if you start with the outcome, you're looking at, hey, is it fast enough? When I go to the website, is it fast enough? That means you look at latency on the engineering side, right? Or if you're doing searches and matches, or machine learning models providing the answers fast and accurately, right? Then accuracy comes into play. So then we start on the back end. What is the right model to build? What's the right size of the model? But again, you trade off on expensive models versus what it takes to deliver that inference. That's why you need this combination of metric of accuracy, speed, cost, everything goes into.
Yeah, that's something that comes up a lot. I just listened to a presentation from Kelly Hill at Khan Academy talking about optimizing an AI tutor. And they were looking at all those different dimensions, kind of the trade-offs between speed and quality, and how do you make sure you don't give a student the answer, but you give them a nudge in the right direction. And so it sounds like you need to work pretty closely across those teams in order for you to say, okay, is the faster model better or is the more powerful model better? Is that true?
Yeah. So again, that's a very you can go and ask faster model better, but using some of these metrics I just described, you figure out the trade-off, the right questions to ask, right trade-offs to make, right? What does a feature cost in terms of total cost, especially in this AI dominated world? What does it take? That goes into play as well, right? If you're
Yeah.
infinite deep pockets, then you can build a feature that's fast, that's good, that's accurate, right? But it comes at a cost.
Yeah, there's a number of different angles. There's that cost. There was an interesting study again with the Bing folks at Microsoft where they found that every 400 milliseconds basically paid a year of an engineer's salary. If every time they got their search results that much faster. Have you done any experimentation on kind of the impact of performance on the likelihood for somebody to actually, make a hire on your platform?
I could answer, because that it's got so many dimensions in there because I run the platform. Yes, there are metrics in place because if you look at the pipeline, what it takes, for example, to have a hire on the platform, you got your basic plumbing, infrastructure piece, machine model learning, the serving piece, the R&D piece. Okay, things. It's a little bit loaded, complicated answer, but I
Uh-huh.
can tell you that's where the outcome-based metrics comes into play, right? What you start off with, for example, one of the metrics, what does it cost to deliver a feature? What does it cost? That means you look at your inference cost, or for example, the compute cost, storage cost, because you're pulling information on a lot of stuff. So that you can translate into, for example, at Google, what we used to do is dollar, for example, dollar per search. It's what does it cost to for an ads, right? QPS, queries per second. The faster you serve, more ad revenue that you can generate. So there's a metric you measure. So we have some similar metric to actually translate what it takes to deliver a feature relevant to Upwork. In this case, searches, matches, closing the contract, so on and so.
Yeah, makes total sense. And in a company like yours, as you're kind of basically trying to implement I would imagine through every layer of your stack, whether it's your developers coding or kind of the front end experience or the back end search, for example. How do you see kind of AI evolving? You know, how you as a company, as as the broader engineering team are working together, and like how do you think things are going to change as AI continues to evolve?
Uh, AI, I have to think about that a little bit. So AI, so if you look at any enterprise, including Upwork, right, the AI has an impact at every stage of it. For example, internally, how do you bring about efficiency using AI from a development perspective, right? What tools do you use? For example, from a developer productivity. For example, if you think about it, because one of the organizations I run is developer productivity, what that means is, for example, to give you an example, if there are 600 to 1,000 engineers, let's say, and each of them, and you have a lot of big pipelines that happen all the time, uh, savings of 5 minutes per engineer on the build time times 1,000 could have an impact because it costs compute costs, that engineering cost and stuff like that. The question
Yeah,
is, how do you shave off that 5 or 10 minutes of build time because you're running so many builds in them from developer experience? Then, for
yeah,
example, AI in this case, for example, could help you use of tools and efficiency being analyzing your build dashboard. Hey, where are we building? Why is there a room for optimization? For example, you start looking at each of the build stage pipelines. As an example, I'm giving a walkthrough what we did recently. For example, we looked at, for example, the build. We have so many thousands of pipelines that happen, so many stages per pipeline. In aggregate, look at all this pipeline and the build stages and see where your long pole is or where you're spending most of the time and optimize it. Hey, maybe we can cache it here across the branches. And one of the ways, for example, AI could help in here is in terms of this analysis of vast amount of data that's coming out in real time, right? As an example, you build
yeah,
efficiency into build. That's a classic example that you could do.
yeah,
So that's on the development side of things. Again, from a product perspective, you think about, I mean, we talk about agents a lot. Agents also resort, for example, I focus a lot on the infrastructure side, like I said. For example, how do we get user in a good client and freelancer experience? Uptime and relevancy. The site has to be up all the time. Relevancy. For that, let's say you're capturing a whole bunch of metrics and then an incident happens. How quickly can you diagnose that incident? You have volumes of data coming in through logs and metrics and Datadog, CloudWatch, whatnot, right? That's where AI can actually help us analyze that quickly to zero in on a problem. And the metric you can watch is mean time to MTTR, mean time to resolve. On the
right.
flip side, is a way can you predict its mean time to detection? For example, a lot of things are happening in a very vast distributed system of 800 to 1,000 microservices. AI can help you analyze that at volume and say, hey, I see some pattern over here, hotspot. I think this could be happening over there. Then we have our SREs look into it. Even before it becomes an incident, you can actually go take care of it, right?
Yeah,
And that
yeah,
results in user experience.
that's a very powerful example. For a lot of people I talk to, I think we're seeing the bottleneck shift from development to testing because they're able to produce so much more code. Is that something you're seeing at Upwork?
That certainly is, but then that's certainly the case. I wouldn't say burden, but then you apply AI to testing as well. For example, in this case, I mean, again, you asked about the AI world. There are multiple dimensions. For example, again, I'm going to break it down in three different pillars. Big where I talk to. When we talk about infrastructure, you have to make sure any infrastructure changes have to be tested well, because an infrastructure going down impacts the whole site, not one product silo, right? So in that case, your testing has to be rigorous because, like I said, your blast radius is going to be very wide. In that case, you bring a lot of test tools. Again, you can apply a lot of AI agentic test in that cases as well. For example, most of the test cases revolve around statistical significance, A and B testing, and so on and so forth, right? In our case, I look into, hey, what's the blast radius? If it's infrastructure related, what tools can we employ to actually make them there tested so we could do zonal region rollouts much faster. The testing when it comes to, for example, machine learning models and stuff, in this case, what you're not going to find is what you're not going to find is whether they binarily fail or not, degradation over time, right? For example, you might be getting some good matches, but over a period of time, it starts drifting. So we need to have some framework in place to actually test it. So testing is not a question about before the product shifts. You need to have like a 30, 60, 90-day periodic testing and watching so there is no drift. So the way you test is also shifting in a way compared to traditional software, right? Because now you have to kind of model, now you have to kind of monitor drifts in your
Yeah.
responses and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Kelly at Khan Academy talked about, you had the slight variations in how the user made a prompt would generate different results. But also they talked about snapshots of a model that, the model was different from day to day to day. And so they would really try to lock in on one snapshot of the model and optimize for that, and then eventually shift to another snapshot. And that it required a lot more A/B testing once it was live, because you could do so much on the eval side, but you needed real users to really understand, like, are they more engaged? Is this leading to the business outcomes? And with the variability that a business user brings to the app, are you factoring that in as well? Are you accounting for that in terms of measuring, is this good software or not?
yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Like for example, I mentioned talk to data, and testing actually is challenging. How do you know? For example, when you have new releases of talk to data, first of all, what metric do you use? I talked about some of the metrics that we use, and how do you test that? Right? How do you test accuracy of the responses when you look at your scope of the answer? Let's say the question is about 10,000 SQL tables or whatnot, right? And the scope is very large across marketing, product management, and finance. How do you test the accuracy of the response, or the correctness, or the reliability of the response? So some of the techniques where you could do is you could use another LLM as a judge. You can actually use some machine learning models to actually compare results to kind of look at the validity and so on and so forth. There are some techniques you'll have to use differently than you use from traditional software testing.
Yeah. And have you had an example of something that, you made a solid investment in, then tested it and realized that while it looked good on paper, wasn't necessarily going to perform well for the company? And what I always think is great about those is, even though they feel like a loss on paper, often the learnings can lead to better investments over time. So is that a challenge that you've had to face?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Yeah, there's one actually comes to mind. I'll give you an example. We actually built an edge caching system for user profiles. The goal was to actually cut the database compute load by 30 to 40%. And he said, hey, it's a great cost saving. It's going to save us $15,000, $20,000 a month because of the new caching layer, right? The team spent about 6 weeks on it. We staged it. It was beautiful. Response times dropped because it's a new caching layer, right? And the team knew how to build these things from, I don't know, 200 milliseconds to about 80. And the cache hit rate was 92%, right? Savings were right on target. We're like, hey, thumbs up, let's ship it. It works, right? But actually, when we ran this in real production traffic patterns, the cracks started showing up. The reason was, for example, the problem was the data freshness. For example, the Upwork's marketplace is extremely dynamic. Freelancers are constantly updating their rates or portfolio pieces. And if a client, let's say, if a client pulls up a cash profile that shows $80, $75 per hour, but the freelancer changes it to $95 or something like that 2 hours ago, you've created a trust problem. Hey, I thought it was 75. See, this caching is showing up as a trust problem, right?
Yeah.
So during peak activity, roughly we had, some percentage of cached profiles where, kind of could potentially serve up in stale data. So we
Yeah.
try to fix it. So engineers say, hey, we'll try to fix it. Shorter TTLs, it's called time to live, where you can invalidate the cache. Event-driven cache purges we did. But every fix actually eroded the gains. It was very difficult to do this. These guys understood caching, but I think given the profile and stuff, we got to a point where by the time we got to a point where we could actually fix it, it was down to an acceptable 1 to 2% hit rate. And it really, you started questioning whether the cache is really helping you or not, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, and again, the operational complexity was so high, we decided this is not worth shipping. It
Right.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example of how reality brings a lot more complexity than the original design might have had in mind.
Yep. Yeah, it was a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it's the kind of thing that caused you to think differently about each of your future projects and say, okay, what similar types of problems might we have with this project that we had with that one, so that you can kind of think ahead and use the learnings from that project to think about what challenges you might face in the real world with new features as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a learning experience, but again, each one is a slightly different learning experience. I think what that taught us is experimentation is still good, right? We learned a lot. And the biggest learning takeaway is, again, in this specific case, we realized we need to bring in more real world profiles into our testing, into our test suite, because it was very dynamic and stuff. So, which means
Yes.
it required a lot more close working with the rest of the teams, bringing in those profiles, simulating them and whatnot, right?
Out of curiosity, that seems like a perfect example for using feature flags so that you could roll out the new caching feature, but just apply it to a small percentage of the population and see how it performs there before you rolled it out more broadly.
Yeah, so in a way we do that. I mean, pretty much a lot of companies do that. We use feature flags and stuff. The idea is that even before we get to that stage, is there a way that's actually the final battleground, right? Even there you have surprises. But even if you can get there, is there a way for us to actually, build our system a lot more closer? Again, it comes but down to velocity of shipping, how fast we want to
Yes.
do. So one of the things we
Right.
did was, set up synthetic benchmarking and staging. For example, all these learnings you create synthetic in staging. Phase one we always do is that through about both in terms of scale and the profile, through 10,000 requests per minute, or attack the cache layer for 72 hours and see how the results match. So basically create a simulated synthetic environment where you model the real world behavior very close to much earlier.
Yeah. Boy, that
And
makes
then,
a
like,
ton of sense.
yeah, to your point, and also doing a lot more feature flag testing where you put it in production for 8 days, 7 days, do a lot of studies, look into it before you decide whether you want to roll it out fully or what learnings can you get.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we're almost at the end of our time. If you were to kind of look back in your career and give someone advice, let's say they're aspiring to have a role similar to yours at Upwork, what piece of advice would you give them in terms of how to run the infrastructure team the way you're running it today?
That's a great question. I would just say come with an open mind. It's come with an open mind. Be bold to experiment. Don't hesitate to modernize. Don't hesitate to question the status quo, because technology changes very fast. The world is changing very fast. It's not static. So it's always good to go with the open mind in terms of, you have to run the business. Don't get me wrong. You have to run the business. It needs to be stable. You don't want to stabilize. At the same time, you need to have enough room for experimentation, trying out new things, so that always you're looking for a measurable outcome, right? Because
Makes a lot of
infrastructure
sense.
plays such a foundation. Nobody declares victory. Hey, the infrastructure is good today. Nobody claps, but it's a new feature people clap, right? But you got
That's
to make
right.
sure the infrastructure is up and running and running smooth.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine you need a whole different set of metrics to think about, measure success in your role in the business versus somebody who's maybe more owning an individual product and they can measure revenue type of thing.
Exactly, and always make the connection between the business metric to how infrastructure plays a role, and that's where I see a lot of the times I see a miss, because it's considered all the way invisible, but
Yeah.
that doesn't need to be the case. shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, I think that's such important advice. It's so easy to feel like, oh, that's so far away that's not my
You're
job.
disconnected.
But in terms of selling the value of what you're doing internally, that's what the whole company cares about. So it's
That
a
is correct.
very powerful perspective to have.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for being with us today. This is Vinoj Kumar, VP of Engineering at Upwork. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. It was fun chatting with you.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Better yet, share the episode with a friend. I'm Ashley Stirrup with GrowthBook. We'll see you next time on the Experimentation Edge.